Whatever we believe about death is an important question for us because it completely changes the way we think about God. And whatever we believe about death is an important question for us because it completely changes the way we behave in life. So I'd like to paint a picture for you. I got a little help here from our lector, Jim Westcott, who's the owner of the Great Harvest Bread Company. So imagine a bakery bag full of crumbs. Now, this is a high-class bakery, so these are high-class crumbs. They're very dynamic with lots of energy. So the folded part of the bag is at the top and the opening at the bottom. Now, the crumbs are pushing against the top of the bag, trying to see through. You can kind of see through a brown paper bag just a little bit, but everything's sort of sepia-toned. Now, we might imagine the Sadducees, who held there is no resurrection of the dead. They proposed a story which was clearly taken from the book of Maccabees, the poster boys of popular belief in the resurrection, about the 7 brothers who die one after another. From inside a brown paper bag, everything looks like a brown paper bag. But the more the crumbs push at the top of the bag, the more they push and pull the bag around them. Now imagine that a force that they cannot see, a hand, pushes from the outside against the bag. Now they keep pushing against the bag because they see this force as the enemy. But the force is stronger than the crumbs. The hand turns the bag inside out and then turns upward, lifting the bag up. The crumbs are still pushing against the bag, but now they're pushing downward. If they stop pushing downward, they look up and suddenly discover that they are on the outside. When we talk about God as creator, God is this huge force lifting us up and turning our world inside out. This is what Moses discovered at the burning bush. The bush is on fire, but it's not being consumed. In the stories of the gods in the Roman and Greek mythologies, whenever the gods entered into human life, people got incinerated. But now Moses discovers that God is not in any way in competition with us. In fact, rather than competing with us or trying to use us or even needing us, when God comes close and turns our world inside out, we become luminescent, radiant with God's fire. We are not consumed, but rather enhanced in the process. The early church fathers consistently summed up the meaning of the incarnation by using the formula, God becomes human, that humans might become God. So God's entry into our humanity amounts to the greatest possible affirmation and elevation of the human. The great 2nd century theologian, St. Irenaeus, expressed it this way: Gloria Dei vivens homo. The glory of God is a human being fully alive. Bishop Robert Barron said that if we lost all of the writings of Christianity and were left only with this phrase, this would be enough. The glory of God is a human being fully alive. Earlier, Jesus had said to the Sadducees that they didn't understand the power of God. Now, Jesus isn't talking about a special power like doing something miraculous, like raising someone from the dead. But he's giving an indication of the sort of power which characterizes God, something of the quality of who God is, the very essence of God, who is pure being. This power, this quality, which God always is that of being completely and entirely alive, living without any reference to death. It was from the burning bush that God said to Moses, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. So God is the great I am, the very essence of being itself. And God is so alive that God has nothing to do with death. And for that reason, facts which are obvious to us, like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob being long dead at the time of Moses, simply do not exist for God. To put it another way, for us, being alive means not being dead. It's a reality which is circumscribed by its opposite. For God, this is simply not the case. For God, being alive has nothing to do with death and cannot even be contrasted with death. So as we try to wrap our minds around what it means to be children of God and children of the resurrection, Jesus does give us a little clue. He tells us that those in the resurrected life are like angels or heavenly messengers. In Luke's gospel, angels appear at the most critical moments, and their function is to interpret puzzling and disturbing events through divine eyes. So the angel Gabriel appears first to Zechariah and then to Mary, announcing God's ability to bring forth life and blessing in the most impossible of circumstances. At the Transfiguration, two heavenly messengers, Moses and Elijah, interpret Jesus' impending death as the new exodus to liberated life. At the empty tomb, two angelic figures convey a message of hope in the most terrible moment. Angelic life, as Luke portrays it, consists in being a messenger of hope in the most awful of circumstances. It's the refusal already in this life to allow evil to triumph. It's not simply delayed reward in the beyond. Here's another way to see that. Dr. Rachel Remen, in her book, My Grandfather's Blessing, tells of a woman in her 30s who discovered that Remen worked with the dying. So she confronted Remen at a party one night and told her bitterly that she resented the idea that there's anything good or meaningful about death. And she told with considerable anger about the horrible death suffered by her husband a few years earlier. He had been diagnosed with cancer, and as therapy after therapy failed, he became bitter, lashing out at everyone, rebuffing anyone who tried to comfort or console him. He died angry and withdrawn. And the woman said to Rachel, "I do not want to die that way." So Dr. Remen replied to her, "So then, how do you need to live?" The woman looked puzzled. And so Rachel asked her again, "How do you need to live to be sure you do not die in the way your husband died?" This time, the woman got it. Remen remembers she looked past me for a moment, making eye contact with something intensely personal in her mind. And then she reached out, touched my hand, and slipped away into the crowd. Some months later, Remen received in the mail a note from the woman. She realized that she had not been living as authentically and fully as she had wanted. There were things yet undone in her life, roads not yet taken that she wanted to travel. She began to revise her living in light of her dying. Thinking about the reality of her eventual death, the woman began a process that led her to rearrange her life and her priorities in the present.